give some time, then start.
And we're live. Yeah. Hi guys. Hello. How's it going? We're gonna just wait a couple of minutes on here. We've been instructed to just wait a couple of minutes till folks come on and we're live and good to go. But maybe what we can do right at the outset is we can just set the tone, set the conversation to begin with, and tell you guys a little bit more about who we are, what we do, and what we're here to talk about today. So if you want.
Yeah. Hi, Raghu. Thanks for joining.
And I'm Pranav, by the way.
This is Arjun. This is Pranav. Maybe we'll introduce ourselves. So, my background is spent my early years studying maths and economics. Something perhaps very relevant to today's conversation, hopefully. And after studying math and economics, I worked in the investment banking and private equity space for a few years. I worked with Deutsche Bank and Goldman Sachs, working on oil and gas M&A, and I did that for a few years before moving into an oil and gas focused private equity vehicle. And I did that till I decided to get on the other side of the table and stop making large-scale private equity investments, but move back to India to play the role of an entrepreneur and run my own enterprise, and also work with other entrepreneurs and assist and enable them to grow their businesses. So I think both of us have had the good fortune of wearing both these hats, and hopefully through this conversation today we can share some perspective and shed some light on how we should be thinking on either side of the table. So with that context and with that vantage point, we look forward to your questions, and hopefully this can be a meaningful dialogue.
Absolutely. So maybe what we can do is before we throw the floor to the questions to the floor in general to everybody there, what we can perhaps start out with is the understanding of fundraising at the seed stage. I would imagine a large amount of you who are watching us right now are potentially first-time or second-time entrepreneurs, perhaps relatively early in your curve or in your journey as an entrepreneur as well. And often the first fundraise and the first check that goes into a business is not just critical, but often the most confusing, often the most complex, even though it doesn't necessarily need to be. So one of the first myths, if there were, that we always try and sort of bust and put it out there, is that it's as important for an early stage entrepreneur to vet, to diligence, to find the right investor to work with at an early stage. And the importance of not just taking money from anybody, but from somebody who could potentially bring value to your business that's not capital.
Absolutely. And I think just to draw a little bit of a canvas about the investment space, today we largely speak about the domain of early stage investments, because each of these investment profiles are dealt with differently based on who's on the other side, what's the stage of the businesses, how mature your business is, etc. So as Pranav was saying, I think for an early stage investment deal or for an early stage investment, it is critical because apart from the size of the check and apart from the capital, I think what's most valuable is the individual that you're forming an early stage relationship. So your early stage investors are almost like an extension of your natural team. An early stage investor is almost like, in a very distant way, a co-founder of many ways, because his interests and your interests are perhaps the most aligned throughout the journey of your enterprise. So, we always say and we always feel that the investment process is a two-way street. It's an equation, and in many ways, both sides have to be equitable, both sides have to be balanced, and I think both sides have to look out for each other. And those are some of the things that we've seen and experienced in all the deals that we've been doing through ThinQbate, which, as some of you may know, is our early stage incubation effort. And maybe we can give some context about it.
Yeah, the idea for us is to be able to come into the ecosystem to some extent and try and, walk the talk with the things that we're perhaps saying to you right now. And the idea is to, like we say very often again, is to put our money where our mouth is. We run a 12-month program where we actually invest capital in each of the companies and try to be a strategic partner to their growth, to their, in their journey, rather, to play a part in their journey, where it's not just beneficial to them, but beneficial to us and beneficial to any stakeholder who may be there within the organization. Because I think some of the most important things at an early stage stem from, if you are raising capital, perhaps raising what we call patient capital, which is often angel capital, which is often could be some institutional capital, but isn't necessarily a VC fund. And understanding the distinction between that and finding the balance, like Arjun said, on who you work with and how you work with them is extremely critical. And that's what we try and achieve here at ThinQbate, where the aim is not to work with anybody and everybody. The idea is to curate and evaluate the best teams, the best people, the best opportunities. But at the same time, the best relationships that we could forge as a team, as a group of individuals with other folks, because we'd love to be able to do that every single day. Because it's very counterintuitive and counterproductive to invest or work with someone when you don't have the comfort of the working relationship with them. And I think that is the greatest starting point for anybody looking to raise any finance.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to plug in.
And I think with any deal-making exercise that you would perhaps pursue in the next few years of your life, I think the fundamental unit of early-stage investment or deal-making is couldn't have been anything but trust. A trust that you as a founder, you as an entrepreneur, you put into people who are signing a check to you and who are going to be with you in this journey. This journey is going to have perhaps more downs than ups, but so trust is important from a founder's perception of his investor, and I think equally so from an investor's point of view. I think you'll hear most investors say that more than perhaps talent and ability, it's the ability for or the nature of the founders and their the transparency that they bring to the table that is, I think, very compelling.
And a question we often ask ourselves, which we do believe that most investors in an early stage, or pretty much every investor in an early stage, should be asking themselves, is why should someone want my money? If you as an entrepreneur feel you're asking the question that why should someone invest in my company, there's no reason why the investor shouldn't be having that same question or that same thought of why should an entrepreneur want my money? There's enough people with checkbooks in the market, right? Why should the entrepreneur choose to potentially work with me?
Yeah, and I think that's the first thing we would say, I think, as to kick off the topic of this discussion, and hopefully most of you are here now. So I think the first thing we'd like to say is don't shy away from asking more about the investor, what they're looking for in you and how they can help. I think don't shy away from this being, it's a two-way conversation, it's a dialogue. So as much as they have the right to ask you questions.
And I think that's often something that's very easily forgotten in the Indian context, that this is a two-way street, it's a dialogue. And I think that power imbalance, and even though very often we're sitting on the other side of the table, the idea for us is to be able to address that relative power imbalance that does exist. Where an entrepreneur thinks, VC is there, he's a fund manager, he runs a fund. How can I ask him, okay, what's the success of your fund been like? How many companies have you seen and exited, right? How much money did you give back to your LPs over the last fund cycle, right? These are tough questions that perhaps, nobody in the Indian ecosystem really wants to ask. But as an entrepreneur, I think it's right. Does the investor not ask you what your plans are? Does the investor not ask about your track record? So if it's a two-way street, it's perhaps as important for you to be able to ask those questions.
So don't shy away from it.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you feel that this may be counterproductive and might trigger the investor's reaction in a negative way, then I think maybe in hindsight, that wasn't your best partner to begin with. So don't be afraid of asking questions. And this is true with not only negotiating the deal, but also I think negotiating the terms and the clauses of a term sheet or investment agreements. I think that would be the first thing and we'd encourage our own portfolio companies to engage in conversations with us, question us, and question the clauses that we put into agreements.
And just jumping in, I'm going to say a quick hi to the few fellows and few folks who have sent across a message here. Ashish, Madhul, Riya, and Arihant, thank you so much for joining us. A quick hello to you guys. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to shoot them our way. We'd be more than happy to address them in any manner that we potentially can. We'll jump back to what we were talking about.
So the other thing that I think we always feel is, and I think that's the question back to the topic, is what's the difference between a good negotiator and a great negotiator? And I think in my point of view, a good negotiator is someone who knows what he's looking for and knows what he wants. But a great negotiator is someone who also knows what the other party wants. Because I think in signing in any document where there are two parties, and for any relationship, for any equation to work, there needs to be a balance of power. There needs to be a balance of interests. So I think to begin with, we'd say that it is very important whilst you go through your investment agreements and documents and try and fend for yourselves, try and understand why do early stage investors ask for certain forms of rights, certain forms of protection, certain legal, I would say, frameworks that will prevent them from being kind of misaligned with the founders. So second thing that we'd say is try and take a step back and identify what's in it. Why is the investor putting in these terms, and try and have a dialogue about that.
We're going to quickly jump into one of the questions that we've just received from Mohiddin Ashraf, which is how to get developers to work for equity. One of the first things I think we're going to jump in and say is that there is absolutely no one size fits all, right? There will be loads of people who will be able to throw templates at you. There will be loads of research and data available online. But you have to remember that this is a people's game. You're dealing with early stage entrepreneurs or early employees at early stage entrepreneurial ventures who don't necessarily see the path the way you could, or maybe they see the path, or maybe they buy into the vision. So it's very important for you to take your context and layer that over anything that we may tell you, someone else may tell you, or any information you're getting from anywhere. So when it comes to, for example, the first thing of how do you get a developer to work for equity, my question to you is, why do you want to compensate the developer in equity? What's your reason for doing that, right? Is that because you can't necessarily afford to pay them a salary at this stage? Is that because they don't necessarily want a salary but want to have more aligned options and aligned interests with the company, so that if things go well or if things go bad, you guys are all in the same ship, either sinking or floating? But at the same time, you got to realize what works for your company, whether at this stage, if you're raising a round of finance, if you want to create an ESOP pool. We can get into what an ESOP pool is and how you can do that when we further along the conversation. But the idea is understanding what you want, right? So if you say you want to get a developer to work for equity, you need to be able to sell them, him or her, your vision, right? You need to be able to be the orator, right? And one of the key things for actually getting people to work for you in a very aligned manner is it's a phrase that I once heard someone use called the chief oratory officer. When you want to be a COO, you don't have to be a chief operations officer. You could be a chief oratory officer. And your job as CEO or COO in that context is to empower your team, is to want your employees, or to want to get your employees to a place where they want to, it's a battlefield for them. They go out and they give their all, right? It's about what you want and what they want and the alignment of that expectation, right? You need to first understand that from your end and from the developer's end, and try and marry those two together and understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm going to try and answer that in a slightly different way. And also another question, I'm going to tie that in with another question that Ashish Yadav has asked about hiring people in an early stage venture. And I think I'm going to marry both those points together. Because recruitment and hiring talent for an early stage enterprise has its own challenges. So the first question that Mohiddin asked is, how do you get developers to work for equity? I think the larger question is, how do you get developers, or how do you get anybody to work not just for equity but also for money? So the fundamental question is, how do you get people to work? And I think that stems from the question of how do you incentivize people? Yeah. It could be with equity, it could be with capital, it could be with none of those two. Right? So I think the first thing that all of us as entrepreneurs, or all of us as leaders in our business need to learn to do is, of course, be great in our oratory skills and be great in being able to sell the vision, in package the vision, and I think enthuse the team with that energy. But I think most importantly also be able to have a compelling execution plan and give people the confidence that you're after this and you're going to chase it till the end. And then you want people to join you in that journey to go and chase your dream with you and for you. So I think more than how to get people to work for capital or cash, because the next question is going to be, how do you get, for early stage companies, how do you get good talent to work at low prices? Or how do you get to this? This is an unending question, right? And I think also I want to say that whoever's asking this question, and for everyone else, this is not, you're not alone in this problem.
Yeah.
This is a fundamentally universal problem for any, I wouldn't even say startup, but for any business.
Absolutely.
So I think coming back to the second point, which is is it necessary to hire a bunch of people to get the work done, or should we start with a few aiming for more in the coming time? I think to answer this question, what we always tell the people we work with is that you reverse engineer again, right? You don't start by how many people you need to hire, but you start by what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
Right? You start by what you want to achieve, and you try and say, if you want to achieve this in this time, what is the minimum resource that you would need to actually get there? And if that means 3 people, then maybe try and budget for 2, right? Because I think the word that we all use quite exhaustively is the word called hustle. Hustle basically means 2 things. One is to do more and to do more with less. So I think with that, we'd say that it's not about how you pay people or how much you pay people, but it's how you incentivize and motivate.
And I think there's another thing that we keep trying to reiterate in that be frugal, not cheap, right? It's short-term versus long-term thinking and decision-making, right? Any decision you take that may benefit you in the short term could either benefit you in the long term or could not benefit you in the long term, right? And there are certain things that will play out in a particular manner. So I think it's extremely important to realize what your long-term objectives are and then reverse engineer from there. Rather than say, I want to hire 10 people and this is what I'll get them to pay, right?
Yeah.
Do as much with as little. And I think a lot of the world's problems that you may see coming at you will slowly start to sort of fade away into the distance over a period of time with concerted effort. So what I'm going to quickly just do there for the folks, we have a few more folks who have joined in over the last 5 minutes. I wanted to just give a quick introduction to us since the first time we're hosting a webinar. This is Arjun and this is me, Pranav, from ThinQbate. We are an incubation center based in Mumbai, where we invest our own capital in each company that we work with in the 12-month program that we run. And we only invest in companies where we can bring value that's non-capital. That value could be human capital, that value could be business network, that value could be just being a shoulder to cry on. Everything we do is a people's business, and our job is to enable people as much as we possibly can. We're not experts. We don't claim to be experts. The idea for us is to be an enabler and hopefully answer questions the way we are to some extent with what's coming across here. So thank you for everybody who's joined us now. We look forward to any more questions that you may have. I'm going to quickly jump to a question that we received from Radul, which is, I have an idea which is so disruptive or new, but I know that it can make loads of money for investors. How should I pitch it, and will the investor look at my pitch given the competition? First thing, as an investor, I can tell you every investor has loads of opportunities to deploy their capital, right? It's not about standing out to an investor. It's about running a sustainable business, right? We often say that don't chase valuation, chase value creation. That's one of the mantras here at ThinQbate, because it's important for you to try and create value, whether that's monetary value, whether that's tangible product value, whether that's consumer value. And the elements of an investor and money and funds and finance all follows. I can promise you that every prudent investor who's in this ecosystem is always on the lookout. Their ears are to the ground, they have hands and feet on the street, everybody's always on the lookout. And that's not something that's going to ever change. So if you focus on value creation, I think valuation and money and this and that and everything, you'll be surprised how often it falls into place. But on the flip side, if the focus is primarily on valuation or on fundraising or on any of the above, you'll again be surprised how often you may come up falling short. Because it's not product building and business building you necessarily are after, which is what investors like to back. It's more, I want to create money, right? So yeah.
And I think on that, the other thought process that we always encourage folks we work with is everyone is chasing to raise capital, right? And unfortunately, capital does not always have all the answers. So one of the other, I think, vantage points of looking at things, and it might sound a bit contrarian given we are today speaking to you as investors, but to also be candidly advising that don't always try and raise money, right? You don't have to raise capital, which then begs the question, then why are we speaking about negotiating with VCs? But that's a different topic. I think to your question, you don't always need capital to answer your problems. there are lots of things that you can prove you can do without an external investor. So I think I'm going to use that, and I'm going to use one more question from the group, which is speaking about the tips on splitting equity with co-founders, which is a very important question. And I think it's an important question not only for you as founders or for you as entrepreneurs, but also for investors. So often, and more often than not, investors, maybe discreetly and not so conspicuously, try and understand the dynamics behind the founding team, right? They try and understand how founders speak to each other, how founders operate with each other, how much they know about each other, what is the friendship they share, what is the comfort level they share, and most importantly, how are they incentivized? Because for any business to work, and you can take any successful business as a case study, incentivization is the basis for people to put an incremental effort, right? So how do you split equity? I think one thing we say is don't be penny wise, pound foolish, which means that when you're trying to split a pie, don't think of splitting equity as giving away, but think of it in a very in an analogy of let the pie be expansive, let the pie be expanding. So if you're giving away to someone 10% equity or 15% equity or 5% equity, that's not value loss, but hopefully that is your investment into ensuring that the pie becomes larger. And I think that's another clause that you'll always often see in the parlance of term sheets and investments is a term called dilution. Now, investors worry about dilution, founders worry about dilution, and I think the holy myth again is with dilution that dilution is not necessarily a bad thing. Dilution is only a horrible thing is if you're not growing at the same rate as your company is getting diluted. But otherwise, dilution is accretive to everyone. Dilution is a good thing. It means hopefully there is growth. So what we would say is when you're speaking about splitting about equity, I think assess what that individual is bringing to the table, assess his intent, and if you feel that there needs to be a little more alignment, then also perhaps spread out that incentivization over a period of time. Right? Map it with his deliverables, or map it or marry it with his achievables. And I think that will hopefully be a two-way partnership.
And I think one of the questions you'll probably ask yourself, or you should be asking yourself, is would I be able to, if I did partake with whatever equity that I do wish to partake, would my company, would my product, would my business be elevated? Would that, like he spoke about value uplift, would I be able to achieve my goals and my dream, my ambition, or our collective ambition faster, more efficiently by bringing on board a co-founder? And like he said right at the start, being, short-term versus long-term in decision-making. I think that's something that one should just be extremely cognizant of. Think about it, pay heed to it, but make sure you're aligning that person for the long term. I think that's one of the things that we can definitely say. And one of the ways, like Arjun mentioned, to do that is to whether you want to tie it in over a period of time with their deliverables, whether each vertical is handled by a different co-founder. Maybe you're a technical co-founder looking for a business co-founder or for a CEO. And it's all about how much value uplift that person could potentially bring to your organization. Because honestly, to a large extent at an early stage, it's very much subjective. Like we said, one size doesn't fit all. So you may think 5% is great, but in that same situation, another entrepreneur may think, no, 7% is great, right? So it's not what we think is the right percentage. What you need to think about is, where are your expectations aligned? What is that co-founder expecting, right? Do you find that expectation to be rational or irrational? Can you logically put that forward to the co-founder, right? And I think sometimes these questions answer themselves. If you think it's irrational and too high that the person wants or the amount they want, I think automatically you will step back and ask that question. And if the answer to that question is no, I'm not negotiating, then maybe that's not a partnership that you should be having in the first place, right?
What you might seem is a great deal by hard negotiating with the person on the other side of the table and maybe getting 2% off and cutting a great deal might actually be a morale breaker.
Yeah.
Right? It might actually erode the moral fabric and the incentivization, or it's just the ethos with which he was trying to join the team and add value. It might just erode that completely. So That's why we started by saying, don't be penny wise, pound foolish. Think holistically, think for the long term, and then.
And I have to be honest, one of the things that we tend to do quite often is we try and not negotiate. We differ sometimes even between the two of us on this very, very many times. But like me, I go for the middle ground pretty often.
It's what you often called good cop, bad cop.
See, that's the balance. You need to be able to find the balance between who can play good cop and who can play bad cop in each scenario. But the idea being that it's not one size does not fit all. And remember that. And don't think that somebody else's solution has to fit your problem. That does not have to be the case. You need to be able to rely and trust whoever you're taking this advice from as well, because you need to know where their interests lie. So I think that's something that we need to be very, very sort of cognizant of. We have a couple of more questions. We're going to just quickly scan through them. Hi, Prabhat. Nice to see you. Good evening to you as well. Chicken and egg problem. Investors want traction and I can't achieve that level of traction without investment. What should I do in this case? Again, Mardul, I don't think any of us haven't been there before, or any founder we haven't met hasn't necessarily been there before. So let's dial it back for a second, right? How would the natural course of someone potentially raising funds from ground up start, right? You often hear of something known as friends and family round, right? That's becoming more and more prevalent in this ecosystem, along with angel investors, right? And that's fundamentally to solve the chicken and egg problem that you speak about here. And that's why people like us actually try and plug in. Because the importance of early stage investors is the trust in the people, is the relationship that you can build, and is the belief in the opportunity, not just from the market, but from the team's potential, right? And that's often why I would take an investor who wants traction with a pinch of salt. If they really loved your team, if they really loved your business opportunity, they would have tried to make the deal work. I don't know, correct me if you think I'm incorrect in saying that, but that's something that we should always be very aware of, right? Where we stand in the conversation with the person we're having the conversation with as well.
Yeah. So there's always a way.
I think, absolutely.
Always a way. With also coming back to contracts, there's
Yeah.
always a way to work things around. There's enough, structuring, history, precedents of how things can be worked out. So we're always often sometimes also uniquely presented with situations where we have to sometimes come up with unique commercial constructs to make deals work. And if you really want to work with that founder, you really got to do it. So it's about being flexible.
I'm going to move on to two similar questions that we received from Ashish and Manoj. Hi guys, I just bundling your questions together from a startup idea and the product failing to deliver, or we want to change to a nice idea and product at the initial stage. Should we work? And I don't know whether an idea can cater to someone in the long term, with the angel investor, so on, young startup. What's the best way to convince? You guys are looking at it, if you ask us or me, I think you're looking at it the wrong way around. Why are you trying to appease the investor? Why aren't you appeasing the customer? The only thought should be to appease the customer, right? Whether it's a B2B customer, whether it's a B2C customer, whoever your customer is, you're trying to build a business. And if you're trying to build a business, the focus should be on business building, right? And I think that's something to be very, very aware of, right? Ideas are very, very easy. Execution, incredibly hard, right? Which is why it's important for you to realize, when we said it earlier, value creation comes through customer satisfaction, right? Valuation comes through investor interest. At an early stage, if you want to deal with patient capital, think of value creation so that the customer is happy. Customer validation will lead to everything. But have you ever heard of a product where the customer really didn't like the product, but investors kept giving them money to run it? Highly, highly unlikely. So focus on the customer, right? And again, you'll be surprised that if you try and service the customer in the best way you can and they love your product, how many or who or what kind of individuals are likely to try and engage conversation with you.
And just to add to that, someone else asked a question about raising capital through equity or debt. And in fact, one thing that we try and tell people is your customer is the cheapest form of financing.
Yeah.
Right. So getting business and making sales and selling what you do is perhaps the best way to finance your business.
And again, I apologize. We have a lot of these one-liners because we do this on a daily basis. There are a bunch of these mantras and mottos that have come together to a certain extent, so they just roll off the tongue from time to time.
But please feel free to reach out to us if you want.
So the idea being that so it sounds crazy. I come from a fourth generation family run organization where the one thing that I was fundamentally told growing up is that you never give away a piece of your business. That is completely counterintuitive to everything that I do today. Right? But there's context to every conversation. The context is who you want to work with. Are you bringing value to them? And how can you work together in the long term? And those are fundamental questions that we just need to be asking ourselves. So if the customer can finance your journey, isn't that best? Why? We say to our portfolio companies, be a dividend paying company. No problem. Be operationally profitable. The investor wants liquidity. How are you going to? You can give the investor liquidity either by giving them a return 3 years later when they raise another round, and hopefully when a VC comes in, they give them a good exit, which in India, let's be very blunt and honest, is not necessarily par for the course. It's tough, right? So why not be a dividend-paying business? What's the problem? Raise PE money 10 years down the line if you have to. But if you can get the customer to finance your journey, value creation for you and your founding team and your first set of employees will be far greater, correct me if I'm wrong, than in any other scenario. So that's something to just always sort of think about. I'm going to just move on to a couple of other questions.
If anyone has any specific questions.
Yeah, happy to answer any specific questions at any time as well. I'm just going to take that one question at the end from Prabhat. We said, firstly, guys, there's no sir. Neither of us have been knighted by the Queen. His name is Arjun. My name is Pranav. Please call us that. We are not sirs by anybody. We're more than happy to be addressed by our name. So it'll be much better than if you guys can do that. But I will address the question from Prabhat, which is, what is the most important part during a presentation in front of an angel investor? I think each investor has their own likes and dislikes. But I think what's for us most critical often is how you communicate your vision and how you're able to back up that talk as well. So I think it's a function of both of them. Not every founder has to be a great CEO. Doesn't have to be the case. Not everyone has to do everything. But the idea is that what you do, you should try and do it the best you can.
And I would just add to saying that, look, at the end of the pitch, an investor may or may not invest in your business for more than one reasons.
Yeah.
But I think if there's one thing that you ask that is most important, I think is clarity.
Yeah.
That if you can be clear about what you are willing to build or wanting to build and how you will build it and what your plans are, there is no right or wrong. So the investor might question you and poke holes at it. But if you have clarity, that evokes a great sense of confidence that you have a thought and you have a plan to go and execute that thought. So I would think clarity gives a huge amount of confidence.
Yeah. I'll also take the next question, which is about talking about planning your fundraising timeline, process details, and how much in advance to plan. I think, especially from a first check into the business, I think there's a few things that one needs to consider. And let's focus on the product to begin with, and then feed into fundraising, the timelines for fundraising, and so on and so forth. What we try and get at is the most important thing before you try and fundraise is to try and achieve a basic product market fit, right? Understanding the consumer and what problem you're solving for them allows you to plan and strategize your growth chart, which allows you to reverse engineer how much money you potentially need to get to that point. So again, like what I said, there's no one size fits all. I think it's very important for step one to be to try and achieve a basic product market fit, even if it's with a minimum viable product and getting it to market, right? Iterating the product is very critical in that entire life cycle. So if we focus on product to begin with, and then focusing on the basis of that product, which I want to convert into a business, which is another obviously much harder element, converting a product into a business. how am I going to achieve that? And rather, what do I want to achieve in the first place, right? And how much human capital I need as a result of that? How much physical capital I need as a result of that? And how much network capital I may need as a result of that? And trying to reverse that engineer in that is also probably step number 2. But at the same time, I think it's also important to raise as little as possible, which I don't know, sometimes is counterintuitive to how people think, and some investors may tell you that thoda zyada kar lo, raise a little bit more. We often propagate raise enough, but as little as you need. Yeah.
So I would just add to that by saying that in this investment process, I think it's important to communicate what is it that you're selling to the investor.
Yeah.
Because you don't have all the answers, but it's important for them to have the clarity that are they investing in the what, are they investing in the who, or are they investing in the how, right? And I think sometimes all three of this you may not have all three of this, right? You might be the most experienced and the most perhaps the smartest, or an individual with the most amount of domain expertise in something, who knows what he's after, but doesn't have a team or the resources to actually deliver, right? And you have different combinations of this. So it's about making sure that you give the investor enough clarity on what is it that he's taking risk on. Is he taking risk on the what? Is he taking risk on the who? Or is he taking risk on the how? Because you're also going to sometimes find investors who are more comfortable in taking one of these many risks. So don't shy away from being honest about what you have on your plate and what is it that you're seeking. And sometimes it might just be answers to either the who, because when you're team building, or the what, when you're actually passionate entrepreneurs who just want to try and find a business in any field. Or maybe it's a how, when you have a great team and you know what you're after, but you just have to join the dots and figure out how you're going to execute. So it's important that because each of these buckets and also risk, I think also are risked differently, and hence the value at which how much money you need to raise and for how much dilution is often pegged at this balance of power between the what and how.
I hope that answers that question. But moving on to the next question. Which one do you want to take, Arjun?
So there's one question about ML and AI, which are two of the most favorite acronyms that we've
Industry 4.0, ML, AI, blockchain, buzzwords that have been capturing the imagination of the entire Indian ecosystem over the last 3 years. When you ask about ML and AI, I think anybody in industry will tell you that there are probably a handful few who are really building deep applications. A lot of what's going on often goes on on the surface. But what I have to tell you from an investor side, there's appetite and how. So if you're looking from an entrepreneurial opportunity or the potential of working in a space that you might be skilled in, I think data, ML, AI, these are interlinked in a manner that will change the way the investor necessarily thinks investing at an early stage. And it's a very interesting space to be in if you're actually building something there. I think we're seeing a lot of Me Too's, a lot of copycat opportunities in the Indian ecosystem, which aren't necessarily building any machine learning, but want to build machine learning and raise money wanting to build machine learning. And I think that's a little counterintuitive again sometimes. So I think that there's traction. There are people who are doing some really good stuff. There are people who are doing some not so good stuff. But then again, that's the opportunity. The market's developing. And in any developing market, the opportunity is most like for any entrepreneur to go and capture the market. So I think it's important for you to think about that and always remember that and push yourself when your back is against the wall.
So Saiba has asked a very interesting question, which is for everyone's benefit, is if I could use only one statement to review the overall health of a company, which statement should I use? Now, as much as we like these one-liners and sometimes monikers, one thing that we would say is that's unfortunately the only thing that the only time that you can't ask one question,
Yeah.
especially as an early stage founder, as a promoter, as a business owner. You cannot dissociate yourself from any function, right? Admin is as important as talent acquisition, and human resource is as important as cash flow management and accounts, is as important as vision building and strategy, is as important as product and tech, is as important as operations, right? So that is the only time that we'd say that one-liners don't work. It's the only time that you have to be adept and balanced at knowing every element of your business, because that is why there's so much value to a founder, and that is why there's so much value to the incentivization that a founder must have towards a business. So,
and just to give a little bit more context, just in case you're talking of whether it be public positioning, whether it be investor positioning, what the reason for describing the overall health of a company is. One of the things that we try and do in our 12-month program is from a, like we say, from a health hygiene point of view, is try and get each of the organizations to a point of, we wouldn't call it operational profitability, but the idea is a relative net cash flow on a month-to-month basis, right? But the idea being that your income and your expenditure are married with good balance, right? And I think that is in some ways indicative of progress. It may not be, because like Arjun said, there's so many other elements that are attached to that. Good financial management doesn't always necessarily mean good business. So again, while one size may not fit all, that's one of the things that we think about from time to time. It's not about the next fundraise. It's not about how the company is going. None of that defines the health, right? I think value-wise, how many consumers, what's been the lifetime value of the consumer, right? If you're a B2C application, what is your retention rate? What are your average usage time rates? I think there's various elements that are data points which are very tangibly measured and are not subjective to interpretation, are more important to depict the health of a company. And one statement may not be enough, but I think maybe 3 or 4 or 5 in that scenario data points will be pretty relevant and more than enough for anybody to understand what you're talking about.
As long as the number of your happy customers are growing than the number of your sad customers at any given point in time, that means you're making progress. And you're not just it's not just motion, but it's progress.
And it's good to have bad customers. It's good to have customers who don't like your product, because they're telling you that. You got to make sure they're telling you that, because you got to know why they don't like your product and how you could change that. So in a situation where out of 10 customers, 5 don't like your product, your aim should be to bring that down to 1. Right? 1 out of every 10. I don't know, just as the hypothetical in a way that you can potentially approach it. Another question from Madhur, which is who to approach. VCs fund the already funded. Angel investors are hard to reach and IPO is not viable. Even if I go for crowdfunding, it won't help in mobilizing a lot of funds. I actually think that's a very relevant question, which we often talk about internally. But I think I disagree to some extent. I'm a huge fan of people reaching out to people. Cold reaching out through different platforms, through LinkedIn, we're very open about it. The worst somebody could do is say no. That's the worst they could do, or not have that conversation. Your aim is to get 10 minutes in front of them, right? And I think finding context in reaching out to them. So when I say cold call or cold email, I don't mean ke 100 logo ka list liya or generic email sabko bhej diya. We're talking about finding context to that person and finding a reason why that person should respond to you, right? If you're able to find that connect, you'll be surprised how often an angel investor will reach out to you or will get back to you, right? Because I think we, for one, are very particular. Anybody reaches out, we're pretty prompt with the turnaround, right? And I think that's the case with most. And I think from a VC fund, I'll be very honest, there's a lot of funds that are sprouting across India today. Micro VC, VC, AIF, so on and so forth, right? A lot of them with absolutely blank slate portfolios. So the opportunity is ripe, I'll be again from an entrepreneur side in the Indian market, to build value, right? And the last point that you said, Pradul, about crowdfunding, me individually, I very, very vehemently disagree there. Because again, if the focus is on the consumer, you will be, and you create a good product, you will be able to crowdfund, right? And I say this with experience. One of the first, if not, I think the first investment that we made was in a company called Square Off. Square Off has now gone on to raise further 2 rounds of funding. That's a whole separate matter. But fundamentally, they're able to sell over $50,000 worth of product every single month. What do? They created the world's first AI chessboard, right? It's an automated chessboard. 22-year-old guys from Bombay who were building a board for a braille board, chessboard for the blind. They took that, turned that product into a crowdfunded campaign, $550,000 in 8 months, because the product sang, not anything else. Investors are not giving them money. Investors also said get traction leke aao. But customer validation was the greatest traction that they could do. Then they were in the negotiating leverage. Then they had an investor asking them, hey, are you raising? Rather than, hey, okay, how much are you raising? Right? And I think that's a better position to try and find yourself in. Crowdfunding is a very untouched market in India. Right? Globally much larger. I think Indian entrepreneurs, hardware entrepreneurs are missing out on the opportunity because the opportunity is there for anybody to take. Move on to the next question. How can you justify about the scenario of Tata Nano that failed to grab customer eyeballs, even if it came up with the idea of meeting the needs of customers, particularly middle-class desires? So first thing, I'll be honest, I haven't necessarily done a case study on what happened with the Tata Nano. But the first mistake, they advertised it for ₹1,00,000 and didn't sell it for ₹1,00,000. I know it sounds crazy, but we spoke about it earlier. Alignment of expectations. The consumer went in thinking, "मैं ₹1,00,000 की गाड़ी लूँगा." But that wasn't the case. Emission standards weren't the same. The European emission standards and Indian emission standards were different. So there's a whole load list of what other people have done incorrectly, and they would have obviously had everything there for them.
Yeah, and I think as an analogy to the other discussion we had a little while ago about selling the dream and transacting with the product.
Yeah.
And I think your question also suggests that owning a car for a middle class family was an aspirational thing, which was I think something which they could have marketed in the way they perhaps did or could do better. But then transacting with a product which was true to its name and true to its what they promised was something that so the transaction didn't happen.
It was more an emotional transaction. It was a dream, which is I think it was a great dream to have, to be able to give affordable car to the masses. It was a great dream, right? But marrying that dream to reality, often there are variables that you can't necessarily control. So, yeah. Cool. I think that's what. We have another question from Veena, which is initially, should we go for company registration or only GST registration? Since company registration comes with a lot of liabilities. I think, again, it's no one size fits all, but why are you doing this? Right? The need for you to register under GST comes at a later date. Anybody, we have our legal expert sitting here in-house listening into the conversation as well. Also a GST expert. But the idea being that why do you need, are you generating revenues north of 20 lakhs right now? If you are, then I'm presuming you've registered your company anyways. Right? And if you registered your company, then... So I think the focus, if you feel like there's a lot of compliances and it's about figuring out what you want. I think if you want to ever raise capital externally, it's probably best for you to register a company. It's probably better for you to register a private limited company. All of those things. But if you guys have any specific questions about any of this, at the end of the session, we'll leave you guys with our details. You can always reach out to us. We try and be as swift as we can with the turnaround. We try to respond to every message or email that we get. So yeah, I think if you're going to bill people, you probably want to raise an invoice, and it'll just make your life easier on various fronts in that domain. Couple more questions. I think we have about another 5 minutes for you guys, 7 minutes for you guys to throw questions at us, and then we can just. Yes, I think we can take three more questions. We're getting looks from our team and our managers, our social media managers on the side. But we'll take 3 more questions.
So what would you advise teams who don't have
cohesion
immediately?
Again, I think spend time with people. I think that's very important. I know it sounds really crazy, but one of the first deals that we did last year was not a deal that we were actually going to do. It was the founders had actually come to one of us to raise money as an angel investor. Young group of 4 founders, all of them went to college together, great college mates. They already had existing commitments and they were raising money and so on and so forth. But for us to be able to judge cohesion, we realized that we had to think differently, perhaps in that context. And we believe in a lot of like human interaction. We believe in getting to know the people behind the organization, behind the facade, as far as we possibly can. And we actually spent time playing football with the founding team. They were all avid footballers. We were avid sports persons. We liked playing. We decided, hey, let's get a game going. And I think for us, things like that, or catching up for a meal, or just getting to know the individual and each person outside of the work environment, told us a lot more about cohesion, of what other people thought of other people, people's weaknesses and people's strong points. Because there's no facade, right? When you're trying to create a working relationship, whether it be with an investor or with a co-founder, you're trying to show your best side. Let's be blunt, right? You're always trying to showcase the best elements and best aspects of you. I think it's as important to showcase the worst.
So, and I think I'll just add to that by saying that, and it's sometimes ironic, but I think cohesion can be built not through the best of times, but through the worst of times. So actually, cohesion is built through pain, or cohesion is built through struggle. And if you pick up any company and any group of founders, I think cohesion is never built through easy times.
Yeah.
And I think that is the nature of cohesion. So I think the fact that you guys are struggling together, the fact that you guys are trying to build something together, the fact that things are not going the way it would have or could have, I think that in itself indirectly is building a certain form of trust and cohesion. So I think it will manifest itself perhaps.
Well, things get stronger when they say it, right? What is it? Elements get stronger when put under pressure, and it's the same applied to people, right? It's the same concept. You see the true side of everybody when under pressure, and that's when cohesion or lack thereof will get very, very clearly showcased. Yeah. So our advice in the situation will be just spend a lot more time. Don't jump the gun and create a relationship with somebody who, even for a second, you're second guessing.
Yeah, and just don't necessarily have to pitch to your partners.
Yeah.
Try and like you said, cohesion is built through weakness. So and not through the strengths. So you guys need to work on each other's strengths, but it can only be unity is built through weakness. So try and find each other's weakness. Are we? I
think we're getting indication that we're going to do one last question, which is we're going to take the question from, I think there's one question from Chandrika, which is in the process of creating value or dividend process in the terms of the customer. We need first investment, maybe for a couple of years. How to address the gap before dividend and investment? I think Arjun said that as emphatically as we can. The customer will always be your cheapest form of financing. Make good product, find good customers, make them love product. Everything else will start to fall into place. Nothing happens magically, right? But it puts you in a position where you control more levers than any other individual within your organization or any other investor.
And not every business starts with a check.
Yeah.
So I know this discussion has been more about that than about
negotiations and instruments. But I think it's important for everybody who's jumping into this environment to think about these things. Because these are things that often only time and having done it will necessarily slap you in the face with.
And right? The context that you build through this, I think, helps us becoming good and better negotiators.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we have to say to each and every one of you is go into every conversation with an open mind, right? You may have experience, you may have expertise, but you're always going to learn something new every single day and every single conversation you have, right? Go in with an open mind, hear the other person out, and then make a decision based on logic and reason. right? Whatever the decision that you need to make there. Somebody said this to me yesterday, right? That you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen more and speak less, right? And it's important to do that in every conversation, especially when you're trying to build a relationship with a co-founder, especially when you're trying to build a relationship with an investor. I think entrepreneurs often pitching to people, again, either of those two that we spoke of, think that silences are meant to be filled. No. There's absolutely no need to. The silence will do its job when it needs to do its job. Don't be overeager. Don't try and do everything. Think about what you want and state as true as you possibly can. Do that.
And still, we spent 55 minutes speaking to you with the silent questions we got from you. So thank you for.
So we're gonna actually wrap up the session right now, and we're just gonna leave you with a couple of parting thoughts. You can always find us and our team at ThinQbate.com, ThinQbate.com. Arjun and I are on all different forms of social media. You can find us on Instagram, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Twitter, you can find us on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to us via email. You can send us an email at info@ThinQbate, ThinQbate.com. We try and respond as quickly as we can. Bear with us if it takes between 24 to 48 hours. But it's been a great session. Please let us know how you like this session as well. Good, bad, ugly. It's only the first time we're doing a webinar with you guys as well. So if there's any way that we can make the experience better for you guys, we'd be more than happy and incorporate it. And yeah, I'll just end with that. Get in touch with us on our social channels. We'll ThinQbate on all the channels I mentioned before as well. And yeah, have a great evening, guys. And it was a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Have a nice evening.